Antoninus Pius, the figure known to history, entered the world as Aurelius Fulvus Boionius Antoninus on September 19th, 86 AD in Lanuvium, an ancient settlement situated 20 miles southeast of Rome. Despite Antoninus's substantial 23-year tenure as Roman emperor, spanning from 138 AD to 161 AD, accounts from antiquity regarding his life are comparatively scant when juxtaposed with those of other Roman emperors. This scarcity arises because the in-depth historical narratives crafted by Roman historians Suetonius and Tacitus were limited in scope, focusing exclusively on the Julio-Claudian and Flavian dynasties of the 1st century AD. In contrast, the sole complete surviving record of Antoninus's existence from antiquity is preserved within the Historia Augusta, also referred to as the Augustan history. This compilation comprises 30 biographies detailing Roman emperors from 117 AD to 284 AD. While these biographies are credited to 6 distinct authors, contemporary scholarship largely posits that this was a mere literary construct, and the Historia Augusta is, in fact, the creation of a singular 4th century AD writer employing diverse pen names. Although academics often regard the Historia Augusta as a historically dubious source, due to its inclusion of unsupported assertions and fabricated details, it frequently stands as the singular resource providing a comprehensive overview of this epoch in Roman history. This is particularly relevant as the otherwise invaluable Roman history authored by the 3rd century AD Greco-Roman historian Cassius Dio has only partially survived. Regrettably, the volumes pertaining to Antoninus' rule were lost during the medieval period. Consequently, a significant portion of the biographical details concerning Antoninus, as well as the chronological framework of his reign, is pieced together from the letters and writings of his close circle, notably his adopted son and successor, Marcus Aurelius. Further reconstruction relies on archaeological findings, such as coinage, and the remnants of structures erected during Antoninus's time as emperor. Antoninus's origins trace back to a branch of a distinguished Roman aristocratic lineage, deeply rooted in the prominent town of Nemausus, within the province of Gallia Narbonensis, presently Nimes in southern France. His paternal grandfather, Titus Aurelius Fulvus, had undertaken the role of legate, or commander, of the local Roman legion. Importantly, he emerged as an early and steadfast supporter of Flavius Vespasianus. Vespasianus would ultimately triumph in the civil conflicts of 68 and 69 AD, ascending to become Emperor Vespasian. In recognition of his loyalty, Titus Aurelius Fulvus was subsequently honored with 2 consulships in Rome, the latter occurring in 85 AD. This office represented the most elevated magisterial position within the Roman Empire, signifying considerable prestige. His son, bearing the same name, and Antoninus's father, also achieved high office, serving as consul in 89 AD. The younger Aurelius Fulvus entered into marriage with Arria Fadilla, the daughter of Gnaeus Arrius Antoninus, a prominent aristocrat who himself had attained the consulship twice. This union produced a single offspring, the future emperor Antoninus Pius. It is generally believed that the future emperor's father passed away prematurely, given that his mother, Arria Fadilla, later remarried to Publius Julius Lupus. Although divorce was a common practice in Roman society, Antoninus spent his formative years at his family's estate in Lorium, situated west of Rome. Following his father's demise, his upbringing was entrusted to his 2 grandfathers, Titus Aurelius Fulvus and Gnaeus Arrius Antoninus, both of whom held positions of considerable influence among Roman officials in Gallia Narbonensis. Reflecting his family's elevated standing, Antoninus received an education tailored for a young Roman aristocrat. Such an education typically prepared individuals for appointments to various provincial governorships and to emulate their forefathers' path by undertaking 1 or more terms as consul. While the consulship had experienced a diminution in its political authority since the conclusion of the Roman Republic and the rise of the empire a century prior, it still retained significant official status. It also served as a crucial stepping stone towards provincial governorships and other distinguished imperial roles. During his childhood, and indeed for much of his adulthood, the prospect of Antoninus himself becoming emperor would have seemed remote. The Flavian dynasty, established by Vespasian in 69 AD, appeared to be firmly entrenched in power. The Roman Empire itself had been established in 27 BC by Octavian, the adopted son and biological great-nephew of the dictator Julius Caesar. Octavian, after prevailing over his adversary Mark Antony in 30 BC amidst civil conflict, seized absolute dominion over the Republic. He then enacted a series of constitutional reforms, adopting the name Caesar Augustus. Although Augustus lacked biological sons, he was succeeded by his stepson Tiberius upon his death in 14 AD. Despite considerable internal conflict within the imperial family, Augustus's Julio-Claudian dynasty maintained imperial control until 68 AD. In that year, Emperor Nero ended his own life in the wake of a military uprising, which culminated in the Roman Senate declaring him a public enemy. Nero's death ushered in a period of political volatility known as the Year of the Four Emperors. This tumultuous year witnessed the rapid succession of three contenders, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius, before Vespasian ultimately secured the imperial title, establishing the Flavian dynasty. Vespasian governed for a decade before his son Titus succeeded him in 79 AD. The brief reign of Titus, who succumbed to an unexplained fever in 81 AD at the age of 42, paved the way for his brother Domitian to ascend to the emperorship. Domitian held this position at the time of Antoninus's birth in 86 AD, while Domitian initially adhered to the policies established by his father and brother, who had garnered favor among the Roman populace through the construction of public leisure and entertainment facilities, such as the Flavian Amphitheater, later recognized as the Colosseum. He purportedly exhibited increasingly tyrannical tendencies. These allegedly culminated in his assassination by officers of the Praetorian Guard in September 96 AD, a day before Antoninus reached the age of 10. On that very day, the Senate proclaimed the 66-year-old Marcus Cocceius Nerva as emperor. The newly appointed emperor was a notable aristocrat, distantly related to the Julio-Claudian lineage, and also enjoyed favor among the Flavian emperors. To avert a recurrence of the civil wars that had followed Nero's death a century prior, Nerva implemented pragmatic strategies during his brief rule. In essence, he functioned more as an interim leader before his death, a year and a half later in 98 AD. To solidify his backing within the army, the childless Nerva adopted the 44-year-old Marcus Ulpius Traianus, the commander of 3 legions stationed in Germany, as his heir. Trajan duly became Emperor Trajan upon Nerva's passing in 98 AD. Subsequently, for the ensuing 8 decades, a custom emerged wherein each emperor adopted a well-regarded individual as their successor, rather than strictly adhering to dynastic succession. It was this very practice that would ultimately set the stage for Antoninus's eventual ascent to the emperorship. Around March 101 AD, during Trajan's 3rd year as emperor, the young Antoninus reached adulthood at the age of 14, assuming the toga virilis, the plain white toga donned by adult Roman males. Information regarding Antoninus's career over the subsequent 2 decades is limited. However, it is understood that he would have been preparing to commence his ascent through the initial ranks of the cursus honorum. This constituted the established progression of military and civil offices that a Roman politician was obligated to hold to qualify for a consulship. Attaining the consulship, in turn, opened the possibility of one day becoming a provincial governor. Although exceptions to these prerequisites were occasionally granted to individuals who enjoyed exceptional imperial favor, there is no indication that Antoninus received such preferential treatment at this juncture in his career. Aspiring Roman politicians were initially expected to undertake military service, eventually achieving the rank of military tribune. The initial civil office within the cursus honorum was that of quaestor, accessible to men aged 24 and older. These age requirements also applied to the privilege of serving in the Roman Senate. Consequently, Antoninus could not have become a quaestor or senator until 111 AD, upon reaching the age of 24. While it is assumed Antoninus possessed military experience preceding his quaestorship, ancient sources provide no details regarding the locations or timing of such service. As a young man, Antoninus married Annia Galeria Faustina, the daughter of Marcus Annius Verus, a prominent political figure and close associate of Antoninus's grandfathers. The precise year of Antoninus and Faustina's marriage remains uncertain, but it is generally estimated to have occurred between 110 AD and 115 AD, based on approximations of Faustina's birth year in 97 AD. The couple is known to have had 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. The 2 sons, Marcus Aurelius Fulvus Antoninus and Marcus Galerius Aurelius Antoninus, are presumed to have died in childhood, as no records indicate them attaining any political positions. Their elder daughter, Aurelia Fadilla, passed away in 135 AD, while their younger daughter, Faustina the Younger, would later marry the future emperor Marcus Aurelius in 146 AD. According to the Historia Augusta, Antoninus was a generous quaestor and an illustrious praetor. Before his consulship in 120 AD, he served in this senior role alongside Catilius Severus, a more experienced and distinguished colleague. By the time of Antoninus's consulship, Trajan had already been deceased for 3 years, having died in 117 AD. Trajan left behind a legacy as one of Rome's most celebrated emperors, during whose reign the empire reached its greatest territorial extent. His conquests included the Kingdom of Dacia in present-day Romania, the annexation of the Nabatean Kingdom in Jordan and northwestern Arabia, and the most successful military campaign ever launched against Rome's long-standing eastern adversary, the Parthian Empire in Mesopotamia and the Caucasus. Following his death in 117 AD, Trajan was succeeded by his 41-year-old cousin Hadrian, whose reign would witness Antoninus ascend to become one of the leading figures in Rome. At the age of 33, Antoninus was slightly above the minimum age of 32 when he commenced his consulship in 120 AD. However, he seemingly lacked excessive ambition at this juncture. Following his year in high office, he retreated to his estate as a private citizen, apparently not overly eager to secure the governorship of a Roman province, the ultimate aspiration for any Roman politician of the era. Instead, he indulged in pastimes such as fishing and hunting on his extensive lands. He also demonstrated diligence in managing his private property. The Historia Augusta further claims that he leveraged his considerable wealth to improve the lives of others, extending loans at a modest 4% interest rate. Early in his emperorship, Hadrian restructured the governance of Italy. Previously under senatorial rule, he placed political control of the peninsula under 4 proconsuls, individuals wielding authority on behalf of the emperor. Antoninus was appointed as one of these 4 proconsuls, administering the region of Etruria in central Italy, where the majority of his estates were situated. Antoninus's selection for this role may have partly stemmed from his perceived lack of ambition. Hadrian, in contrast to previous emperors, spent a significant portion of his reign outside Rome, touring and reforming the provinces. Consequently, he required proconsuls governing Italy who were not excessively ambitious, individuals he could trust not to attempt rebellion and seize imperial power. Antoninus's appointment as Hadrian's representative in central Italy, while the emperor was absent in the provinces, undertaking projects such as the construction of a major defensive wall across northern Britain, is indicative of the trust Hadrian placed in him. This context makes the lack of detailed information regarding the personal relationship between Antoninus and Hadrian, both in the 100s AD before Hadrian's emperorship and in the 200s AD, particularly regrettable. Furthermore, ancient sources do not specify the duration of Antoninus's tenure as proconsul in Italy, although he appears to have discharged his duties with diligence and efficiency. Following his service as one of the 4 governors in Italy, Antoninus held the position of proconsul of Asia for a year. This province, located in the western part of modern-day Turkey, was, after Rome and Italy, the wealthiest region in the entire empire. Julius Capitolinus, purportedly the author of Antoninus's biography in the Historia Augusta, notes that Antoninus's elder daughter Fadila passed away shortly before his departure for Asia. This detail suggests that Antoninus served as governor of Asia around 135 AD. Given Asia's status as the empire's richest province, its governorship was considered the most prestigious provincial office. According to the Historia Augusta, Antoninus governed Asia in such a fashion that he alone excelled his grandfather, referencing his maternal grandfather Arrius Antoninus, who had held the same position under Vespasian in the late 70s AD. The region's economy prospered during Antoninus's governorship. Beyond his official duties, he cultivated relationships with prominent individuals, including Herodes Atticus, an Athenian scholar and official who governed the free cities within the province of Asia at the time. An anecdote recounted by the 3rd century AD scholar Philostratus of Athens describes an incident during Antoninus's visit to the district of Smyrna, presently known by its Turkish name of Izmir. He was lodging at the residence of Polemon, a rhetoric instructor who enjoyed the favor of emperors Trajan and Hadrian. Upon his return to Rome, Antoninus was appointed to Hadrian's imperial council, a body comprising distinguished politicians, orators, and jurists tasked with advising the emperor on a broad spectrum of political, legal, and judicial matters. Now in his late 40s, Antoninus became part of Hadrian's inner circle and earned a reputation for advocating leniency and moderation during council meetings. By this period, Hadrian was in his early 60s and experiencing declining health. In the initial phase of his reign, the childless Hadrian appears to have viewed his brother-in-law Lucius Servianus as his unofficial successor. However, Servianus was approaching his 90s by the mid-130 AD, prompting Hadrian to consider Servianus's young grandson, Lucius Salinator. Nevertheless, following a near-fatal hemorrhage in 136 AD, the emperor opted instead for the adoption of the 35-year-old Lucius Ceionius Commodus, one of the 2 consuls of that year. Upon adoption, he assumed the name Lucius Aelius Caesar. The rationale behind Hadrian's adoption of Lucius Aelius as his heir remains somewhat ambiguous. It is possible Hadrian made this surprising choice due to Lucius Aelius's family connections. While the new heir had a young son, he also had 2 older daughters, the elder of whom was betrothed to Marcus Annius Verus, the 15-year-old grandson of the 3-time consul who was Antoninus's father-in-law. According to the Roman historian Cassius Dio, writing in the early 3rd century AD, Hadrian held particular affection for the young Marcus and envisioned him as his ultimate successor. However, this plan was soon disrupted. In 137 AD, shortly after his appointment to a second consulship, Lucius Aelius was dispatched to assume control of the provinces of Pannonia in modern-day Hungary. He spent a brief period there before returning to Rome in winter, seemingly already unwell. There, he passed away on January 1st, 138 AD, compelling Hadrian to select a new successor. 3 weeks after Lucius Aelius's death, on January 24th, Hadrian convened a meeting of his council on his 62nd birthday, during which he announced the formal adoption of the 51-year-old Antoninus as his heir. Although Antoninus possessed limited military experience and had primarily spent his political career in Italy, he had demonstrated competence as a provincial administrator and was well regarded among the Roman political elite. His age and the absence of surviving sons may have also contributed to his selection, as Hadrian seemed to be seeking a temporary figurehead to occupy the imperial seat for a few years until the teenage Marcus Annius Verus, the future emperor Marcus Aurelius, reached an age suitable for assuming imperial responsibilities. Consequently, as a condition of his adoption by Hadrian, Antoninus was required to adopt both Marcus Annius Verus and the 7-year-old Lucius Ceionius Commodus, son of the deceased Lucius Aelius. While the former adopted the name Marcus Aurelius Verus Caesar, the latter's name remained unchanged, indicating Marcus's stronger claim to the succession. Although Antoninus was already Marcus's uncle by marriage, upon becoming emperor, He further solidified his ties with the young man. He achieved this by terminating existing betrothal arrangements within the younger generation and instead arranging an engagement between his surviving daughter, Faustina the Younger, and Marcus Aurelius. Therefore, owing to a series of unusual political circumstances and the untimely demise of Lucius Aelius, Antoninus unexpectedly found himself elevated to become Hadrian's immediate successor. Antoninus's nomination as heir did not garner universal approval. His detractors included Catilius Severus, his consular colleague from 120 AD, and a man named Ummidius Quadratus, both of whom were also related to Marcus Aurelius. While Catilius Severus was removed from his position as city prefect of Rome for his opposition to Antoninus, no further punishments ensued, and the bloodshed that had accompanied Hadrian's adoption of Lucius Aelius was averted. Antoninus did not immediately accept Hadrian's offer, requesting time for contemplation. It was only a month later, on February 25th, that the formal adoption ceremony took place. Following his adoption, Antoninus was granted the Tribunicia Potestas and the Proconsulare Imperium, the two ancient republican offices that had formed the formal basis for the emperor's political and military authority under Augustus. Antoninus became the de facto ruler of the empire as the ailing Hadrian spent his final months in considerable pain due to a worsening heart condition. According to Julius Capitolinus, Antoninus had to intervene to prevent the emperor from attempting suicide. A temporary improvement in Hadrian's health ensued, enabling him to travel to Baiae in southern Italy, where he died on July 10th, 138 AD, with his adopted heir present. Antoninus's initial act as emperor was to transport his predecessor's body to Rome for burial. While most early Roman emperors had been interred in the mausoleum of Augustus on the Field of Mars, situated on the eastern bank of the Tiber River, the tomb was nearing capacity. Consequently, Hadrian had initiated the construction of a new mausoleum of similar design on the opposite bank of the Tiber, a short distance to the southwest. While construction commenced during Hadrian's lifetime, it is possible that it remained incomplete upon his death, requiring Antoninus to finalize the building. Centuries later, this structure was transformed into a castle and papal residence known as Castel Sant'Angelo. Antoninus's ascension was welcomed by numerous senators who had witnessed a reduction in their political power and privileges during Hadrian's reign. The new emperor reversed some of Hadrian's most unpopular policies, including the dissolution of the 4 proconsulships governing Italy and the restoration of senatorial governance over the peninsula. However, Antoninus's proposal to confer divine honors upon Hadrian initially met with resistance. It was only through threatening to relinquish his imperial powers that he successfully persuaded the Senate to deify Hadrian. The Senate's apparent reluctance remains unclear, given the standard practice of deifying deceased emperors and Hadrian's relatively positive public image. It may have stemmed from Hadrian's pronounced preference for Greek culture over Roman traditions. In a gesture of appreciation for Antoninus, in September 138 AD, the Senate bestowed the title of Augusta upon his wife Faustina and granted him the cognomen of Pius. The Historia Augusta offers no fewer than 5 potential explanations for Antoninus's honorific name, including his attentiveness to his elderly father-in-law, Annius Verus, his filial devotion to Hadrian following his adoption, and his efforts to convince the Senate to deify Hadrian. Further reasons included the general reputation for clemency and kindness he had cultivated throughout his political career. Based on contemporary accounts, Antoninus genuinely merited this epithet. His successor, Marcus Aurelius, in his renowned Meditations, underscored Antoninus's sense of propriety and duty, citing his adoptive father's example of gentleness and to be unshakably resolute in judgments made after full investigation, no vainglory about outward honors, love of work and perseverance, readiness to listen to any who had something to contribute to the good of the state, his practice of rewarding every man impartially according to his deserts, knowing from experience where to tighten the reins, where to relax them. By the time Antoninus became emperor, he was already among the wealthiest individuals in the empire, having inherited significant fortunes from both his paternal and maternal grandparents. According to an anecdote in the Historia Augusta, Antoninus's wife Faustina had anticipated further financial enrichment from her husband's imperial ascension, to which the emperor reportedly responded, "Foolish woman, now that we have gained an empire, we have lost what we had before." Nevertheless, Antoninus may have sought to prevent his private wealth from being commingled with state expenditures. The establishment of the res privata, a distinct department dedicated to managing the emperor's private financial affairs, may date back to Antoninus's reign. Marcus Aurelius notes that Antoninus displayed no inclination towards ostentatious honors and was prudent and economical in his provision of shows, although he acknowledged that entertainments such as gladiatorial contests and chariot races were considered integral aspects of Roman life. Antoninus himself appears to have particularly enjoyed chariot racing and acceded to the Senate's request to organize races to commemorate his first anniversary as emperor on his birthday, September 19th, 139 AD, while monuments bearing inscriptions recognizing Antoninus as emperor date back to 138 AD. News of his accession only reached some of the more remote regions of the empire in the following year. The ascension of a new emperor was typically marked by a gift of gold to the emperor, termed the aurum coronarum. However, in line with his reputation for both austerity and generosity, Antoninus returned all the gold he received from Italy and half of that from the provinces. He also demonstrated generosity in allocating financial resources to complete construction projects initiated or planned by Hadrian. Inscriptions from 139 AD reveal that he provided funding for the construction of bathhouses at the port of Ostia, situated at the mouth of the Tiber, and also oversaw the dedication of the amphitheater in Capua, which had been restored by Hadrian. Antoninus's benevolence towards his subjects prompted the Senate to offer him the title of Pater Patriae, or Father of the Country, which he had declined the previous year. On this occasion, the emperor chose to accept. In contrast to most preceding emperors, Antoninus exhibited no haste in replacing his predecessor's appointees. This suggests that his rule enjoyed widespread acceptance throughout the empire, obviating the need to install his own loyalists to consolidate authority. For the majority of his reign, Marcus Gavius Maximus served as Praetorian Prefect, an office held by the commander of the Praetorian Guard, which also entailed considerable informal military and civilian influence within the city of Rome. While Capitolinus asserts that Antoninus retained successful provincial governors in their positions for periods ranging from 7 to 9 years, it appears that most Roman officials continued to rotate between provincial governorships every few years. In 139 AD, Quintus Lollius Urbicus was transferred from governing one of the German provinces to Britannia. Shortly after his appointment, a rebellion against Roman rule appears to have erupted among the Brigantes, an ancient Brittonic Celtic tribe inhabiting a substantial portion of present-day northern England. They resided on both sides of Hadrian's Wall. This unrest led Antoninus to abandon Hadrian's policy of establishing the frontier at Hadrian's Wall. Lollius Urbicus was instructed to drive the Brigantes further north towards Scotland, then known to the Romans as Caledonia. While textual sources offering a comprehensive account of Lollius's campaign in Britain are lacking, archaeological evidence indicates that the Roman general initiated preparations by establishing a base at Corbridge, a town just south of Hadrian's Wall. Around 141 AD, he led the 3 legions stationed in Britain in an assault against the Brigantes and various Caledonian groups. By 142 AD, the Romans had subjugated much of lowland Scotland, and Antoninus was honored with the title of Imperator, signifying conqueror, for a second time. In Republican times, this title was bestowed upon generals following victorious military campaigns. However, after Augustus, it became associated with the emperor, and the term emperor itself is derived from imperator. Antoninus had initially received the title of Imperator in 138 AD upon his adoption by Hadrian. But this second conferral was a direct result of military triumph. Unlike Hadrian, who had spent a considerable part of his reign touring the provinces, Antoninus remained in Italy for almost the entirety of his 23-year rule, dividing his time between Rome and his other properties on the peninsula. This approach resonated favorably with the senators in Rome, who felt Hadrian had neglected Rome and Italy during his extended absences. By residing in the capital, Antoninus could also promptly address reports from his provincial governors, eliminating the need for imperial messengers to constantly pursue him to deliver news. While Antoninus did not personally accompany his armies on campaign, entrusting military command to more seasoned and capable individuals, he was not uninformed about military matters. He appears to have been responsible for significant strategic decisions. The orator Marcus Cornelius Fronto, a tutor to the emperor's adopted sons and author of letters surviving from the mid-2nd century AD, documented Antoninus's approach to the Britannia campaign. He famously stated, although he delegated the campaign's execution while residing in the palace at Rome, akin to a ship's captain at the helm, the entire voyage's glory and navigation are attributable to him. To secure these territorial advancements, Lollius Urbicus and his legions erected an earthen barrier stretching approximately 40 miles from the Firth of Clyde in the west to the Firth of Forth in the east. This Antonine wall was fortified with 16 strongholds and connected to Hadrian's wall by a military road, facilitating swift movement of personnel and supplies between the two defensive lines. While Hadrian's wall enjoys greater renown, Antoninus effectively extended Roman dominion further north in Britain. His wall, although shorter than Hadrian's, featured a greater density of fortifications along its extent. During Lollius Urbicus's preparations for his northern British campaign, around 140 AD, a significant earthquake afflicted Asia Minor. The orator Aelius Aristides vividly recounted the devastation on the Greek island of Rhodes, which also suffered a tsunami. As the earthquake descended upon the island, the sea receded, leaving harbors exposed and dry. Homes and tombs were split apart and collapsed. Tower crashed onto tower, dockyard onto warship, temples onto altars, people onto people. This depiction of utter ruin was echoed across other islands in the region and along the mainland coast. Given Antoninus's prior role as proconsul in Asia, he possessed familiarity with the area and its officials, possibly nurturing a personal connection to it. Julius Capitolinus records that the emperor rebuilt these cities in magnificent fashion. Beyond offering financial aid after natural disasters in Asia Minor and elsewhere, Antoninus's overarching policy towards the provinces aimed to lessen the tax burden on his subjects. This was partly realized by eliminating corruption linked to the imperial postal service, which Romans from Italy commonly misused for unofficial travel throughout the empire at the expense of provincial taxpayers. The year 140 AD also marked the passing of Antoninus's spouse, Faustina the Elder, who was interred in Hadrian's mausoleum. According to Capitolinus, numerous rumors circulated regarding Faustina's alleged licentious and unrestrained lifestyle during her lifetime, which Antoninus attempted to quell. Limited contemporary evidence substantiates these claims, although Faustina's habits and expenditures might have been less restrained than her husband's. Antoninus held deep affection for his wife and commemorated her with a charitable initiative to support orphaned girls, known as Faustininae. Following Faustina's demise, the Senate honored her memory through deification, memorial games, and the establishment of a temple in the Roman Forum, complete with priests and silver and gold statues. Faustina's image frequently appeared on monuments from Antoninus's rule, often portrayed alongside him as a symbol of marital harmony. The early 1400s AD saw disturbances on the empire's borders, particularly in the northeast. An apparent revolt in Dacia prompted the emperor to redeploy legions to the province of Lower Dacia, enhancing the military authority granted to its governor. In Pannonia, Antoninus appointed a new ruler for the Quadi tribe, a Germanic group residing along the border, and he took similar action when the Armenian throne became vacant. The Parthians reacted to this situation by dispatching an invasion force toward Armenia, but they desisted after Antoninus sent a letter to the Parthian king threatening intervention. Capitolinus's mention of Antoninus deploying an army to subdue a German rebellion is supported by a Roman inscription celebrating Antoninus's victory over the Germans. Archaeological findings in Germany also point to significant road construction activity, potentially related to this campaign. Between 143 AD and 145 AD, Antoninus oversaw an extensive infrastructure project to improve transportation links to his ancestral province of Gallia Narbonensis. This included upgrades to the Via Aemilia in northern Italy, followed by repairs and new construction of roads in Gallia Narbonensis. As these territories were distant from the empire's frontiers, the road improvements lacked military purpose, instead aiming to facilitate commerce between Rome and southeastern Gaul, a primary source of wine and timber for Rome. While these military and infrastructural endeavors held clear significance, as with much else of Antoninus's reign, only scant details regarding them are available. While Antoninus was known for his devotion to Italy, he shared Hadrian's interest in Greek culture and elevated Greeks to influential positions in Rome. In 140 AD, for instance, he invited his longtime friend Herodes Atticus to Rome as tutor to Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Commodus. Further demonstrating the emperor's favor towards his Greek friend, Herodes was appointed consul in 143 AD. In that same year, the orator Aristides visited Rome and delivered 2 speeches in praise of the emperor. In the first, he lauded Antoninus's establishment of justice and order throughout the empire, highlighting the emperor's wise governance and his concern for his subjects. In his second speech, Aristides contrasted Antoninus with his predecessor, proclaiming, "The deities ensured his pure and pious rise to power, leaving acts of madness and insanity to others, and reserving for him actions of justice, beneficence, and universal piety." Despite Hadrian's affection for Greece, where he visited twice during his reign, by the late 130 SAD, his management of the Greek provinces had alienated some Greek intellectuals. Conversely, Antoninus had displayed favor to the Greeks during his proconsulship in Asia and maintained his positive image there after becoming emperor. While disturbances on the empire's northern border had been quelled by 145 AD, that year marked the height of a Berber revolt in Mauritania, North Africa, encompassing modern-day Algeria and eastern Morocco. Although Mauritania had been part of the empire for over a century, Roman control was tenuous in certain areas, with Berbers regularly emerging from the Atlas Mountains to raid Roman settlements nearer the Mediterranean coast. During Antoninus's reign, the unrest intensified, compelling the emperor to deploy a military force to defeat the Berbers, who were subsequently pushed back into the mountains and desert. The year might also have witnessed a challenge to imperial authority in Hispania, as in September 145 AD, the Senate condemned Cornelius Priscianus for hostile action disturbing the peace in the province of Spain. The Historia Augusta states that Priscianus was involved in a plot to seize the throne and was forced to take his own life. The Historia Augusta further mentions Antoninus's approval of the execution of Attilius Titianus for a conspiracy to overthrow him. However, in both cases, the emperor declined to prosecute their accomplices and, in his general judicial approach, ensured thorough investigation before delivering judgments. These 2 individuals might have been implicated in a scheme to depose Antoninus, seeking support from the armies in Hispania as they mobilized to suppress the North African uprising. By the mid-1400s AD, Marcus Aurelius, in his mid-20s, was assuming a more active role in Roman politics. He had held his initial consulship in 140 AD at age 19, alongside the emperor, and in 145 AD, the 2 men again served as joint consuls. In the spring, the 24-year-old Marcus Aurelius wed his 15-year-old cousin Faustina the Younger. The latter received the title of Augusta, which had remained vacant since her mother's passing 5 years prior. In November 147 AD, they welcomed a daughter, Domitia Faustina, the first of at least 14 children. Antoninus marked this occasion by bestowing upon Marcus the Tribunicia Potestas and the Proconsular Imperium, along with the right to present issues to the Senate for discussion before other matters. Although Marcus Aurelius now possessed the same official powers as Antoninus, the latter retained ultimate authority and implemented these measures to ensure Marcus became accustomed to the duties and responsibilities of a Roman emperor. This represented a significant constitutional development of Antoninus' reign, marking the first instance of imperial powers being shared by a senior and junior ruler, a step toward the concept of multiple emperors, which would fully emerge in the late 3rd century AD. The year 148 AD commemorated the 900th anniversary of Rome's founding. This jubilee year was celebrated with lavish games, featuring a host of exotic animals, including elephants, giraffes, rhinoceroses, and crocodiles, exhibited and slaughtered in amphitheaters. To cover the expenses of these entertainments and other governmental activities, Antoninus debased the silver coinage by 5%. Although this seemingly had no immediate negative impact on the Roman economy, throughout the first decade of his rule, Antoninus had anticipated the 900th anniversary by issuing coinage depicting Rome's founding myths, including the Trojan warrior Aeneas, the hero of Virgil's Aeneid, and the brothers Romulus and Remus with the she-wolf, who legendarily raised them on the banks of the Tiber River, where they later founded the city in 753 BC. Other coins from this era provide evidence of a religious revival, redirecting focus to the ancient gods of Greek and Roman mythology, whose worship faced challenges from the rising prominence of cults like that of the sun, god Helios, in the eastern provinces. True to his family name, Antoninus was firmly committed to old religious traditions and consistently performed the sacrifices expected of him as Pontifex Maximus, Rome's chief priest. In 139 AD, at the start of his reign, Antoninus restored a temple dedicated to Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, and established further shrines to Jupiter in 148 AD and 157 AD. The year 148 AD also marked Antoninus' 10th year on the imperial throne, which he commemorated by symbolically relinquishing his powers before re-accepting them from the Senate, following a tradition established by Augustus, who sought to legitimize his imperial rule through this ritual, one that implied his powers were willingly granted by the people of Rome. While later emperors abolished this formality, Antoninus genuinely attempted to strengthen the aristocratic element of the unwritten Roman constitution by bolstering the Senate's powers. As a former senator himself, he would have been familiar with his colleagues' complaints about Hadrian's rule being perceived as distant. As emperor, Antoninus demonstrated deference to the Senate and made generous gifts to individual senators. Despite Antoninus's efforts to elevate the Senate's dignity, where important state matters continued to be debated, political decision-making remained confined to the select group of leading senators within Antoninus's imperial council, who could influence their colleagues' votes. According to Capitolinus, the extensive legal reforms from Antoninus's reign were enacted upon the advice of legal experts within his council. These reforms aimed to simplify legal proceedings and enhance protections for vulnerable societal members. Measures introduced by Antoninus included additional safeguards for adopted children, confirmation of a freed slave's irreversible freedom, and regulations to protect slaves from excessively abusive masters. In legal matters, as in other areas of state administration, Antoninus was not particularly innovative, but sought to improve existing processes. As emperor, Antoninus personally received petitions from his subjects and diligently investigated complaints. Disputes between individuals or cities that could not be amicably resolved were escalated to the emperor, whose judgment was rarely questioned. According to Aristides, Antoninus's solutions to these complex issues satisfied all parties involved. At the close of his first decade in power, The 62-year-old Emperor Antoninus Pius had avoided the costly wars and internal rebellions of his predecessors and was praised as a wise ruler throughout the empire. Near the outset of his reign, a devastating earthquake struck Asia Minor, and around 151 AD or 152 AD, the province suffered another earthquake, this time affecting cities in the northwest, including Smyrna, Nicomedia, and Ephesus, three of the wealthiest and most populous cities in the eastern Mediterranean. On this occasion, Marcus Aurelius played a significant role in relief efforts, as evidenced by a coin indicating Marcus's responsibility for Smyrna's reconstruction. Antoninus is known to have constructed bathhouses in Nicomedia and Ephesus, possibly as part of reconstruction efforts. Although further details are limited, the city of Ephesus appears to have been particularly favored during Antoninus's reign, hosting two temples dedicated to the imperial cult. His favor towards the Greek world is also evident in extensive construction at Epidaurus in mainland Greece, site of the healer god Asclepius's sanctuary, and in Athens, where he completed an aqueduct begun by Hadrian. In the early 150s AD, possibly in 153 AD, Antoninus faced a serious revolt in Egypt near the Red Sea coast. While Julius Capitolinus asserts Antoninus spent his entire reign in Italy, both Aristides and the 6th century AD Byzantine chronicler John Malalas claim Antoninus visited Egypt and Syria, personally leading a military force to suppress the uprising. The pacification campaign seems to have been straightforward, and Antoninus visited Alexandria, restoring the gates of the sun and the moon and building a racecourse. After departing Egypt, Antoninus traveled to Antioch in Syria. Antoninus's presence in the east would have calmed his subjects' anxieties and instilled fear in Rome's rivals, particularly the Parthian Empire. Aristides mentions a peace treaty concluded in 155 AD between the Parthian king and Antoninus, who was accompanied by Marcus Aurelius. In his Historia Augusta biography of Antoninus, Julius Capitolinus claims the emperor also defeated a Jewish revolt, although dating this insurrection is difficult. Given the well-documented nature of previous Jewish revolts against Roman rule since the mid-60s AD, it seems likely this was a minor bout of unrest in Judea during Antoninus's reign. More broadly, Antoninus permitted many Jews who had fled Judea during Trajan and Hadrian's reigns following revolts there to return, and eased the generally anti-Jewish policies pursued by the Roman state for a century. References to a Jewish revolt during Antoninus's reign also appear in the First Apology of Justin Martyr, a Greek philosopher from Judea who converted to Christianity and defended Christians from religious persecution. The First Apology was addressed to Antoninus and dated between 155 AD and 157 AD. The emperor may have been in Syria when he received Justin's petition, urging Antoninus to halt Christian persecution. He also offered an intellectual defense of Christian thought by comparing it to Greek and Roman mythology, and denied that the religion posed any political threat to Rome. Martyr's intervention is curious, as there was no concerted Roman policy of Christian persecution by the mid-2nd century AD, which would only begin a century later as Christianity's numbers grew dramatically, and the state became genuinely concerned about its perceived threat. Martyr's First Apology should probably be interpreted as one of the early Christian efforts to convince the Roman state that Christians were not a heretical offshoot of Judaism, but adherents of a distinct religion. By the time Antoninus returned to Rome, the empire again faced disturbances along its European frontiers. Another uprising in Dacia in the 150s AD was crushed by Governor Marcus Statius Priscus, who was rewarded with a consulship in 159 AD. The lat 150s AD also saw policy changes in Britannia and Germania's defense, as the Antonine Wall in Scotland was abandoned within a decade of its construction, its garrison withdrawn to Hadrian's Wall. Around the same time, the frontier in Upper Germany and neighboring Raetia was moved forward by some 15 miles. These developments appear to have coincided with legion movements from Germania to Britannia. The reasons for abandoning the Antonine Wall so soon after its construction remain unclear. But Britannia's governor, Gnaeus Julius Verus, may have been transferred from his prior German post to suppress another revolt by the Brigantes and Caledonians, after which the Antonine Wall was deemed indefensible and abandoned. Alternatively, these developments may have resulted from policy shifts in Rome following Praetorian prefect Gavius Maximus's death after 2 decades in office. Antoninus's name is also associated with an attempt to establish commercial ties with China, although his involvement in the embassy remains unproven. The Book of the Later Han, chronicling the later or Eastern Han dynasty in China during the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, records Emperor Huan receiving an embassy from Andun, described as King of Dakin, the ancient Chinese term for the Roman Empire. Romans and Chinese had traded silk and glassware indirectly for centuries via Central Asian and Indian intermediaries. In 97 AD, Eastern Han General Ban Chao attempted to send an emissary directly to the Romans, but was prevented by the Parthians. The Roman envoy's meeting with the Chinese emperor, recounted in the Book of the Later Han, is dated to 166 AD, 5 years after Antoninus Pius's death. This strongly suggests the embassy was sent by the late emperor, as reaching China from the Mediterranean would have taken years. Alternatively, as the Book of the Later Han indicates, the envoys entered China via Vietnam. They may have been enterprising Roman merchants seeking trading privileges without official accreditation, avoiding the Parthians by sea. While the envoys brought gifts from Southeast Asia, the Chinese court seems unimpressed with Roman offerings, and Romans and Chinese never established direct diplomatic or commercial relations despite later 3rd century AD embassies. A final, rather bleak note to Antoninus's reign was in 165 AD, when a mysterious, deadly plague began sweeping the Roman Empire. Although it primarily dominated Marcus Aurelius's reign, the epidemic is known as the Antonine Plague, as it first reached the Mediterranean during Antoninus's final years. To this day, the disease remains unidentified, with measles or smallpox as likely contenders, the latter slightly more probable based on contemporary symptom descriptions. It clearly originated in the East, somewhere in Asia, as early reports came from Rome's eastern borders. Its impact was undeniably devastating, particularly in a state highly urbanized by ancient standards, with many large, cramped, and unsanitary cities where disease spread rapidly. By the end of its first major wave around 180 AD, an estimated 10 million Romans had died, possibly significantly more, representing roughly 10 to 25% of the empire's population, and one of the deadliest plague epidemics in Mediterranean history. Old age, not plague, would claim Antoninus's life. By the late 1500s AD, in his early 70s, he was in poor health. The Historia Augusta recounts he could no longer stand unaided. Due to the emperor's declining health, Marcus Aurelius increasingly assumed political responsibilities. Indeed, more broadly, the two men had worked effectively together during Antoninus's 2nd decade, and Marcus Aurelius's name frequently appeared alongside Antoninus's on honorific inscriptions during the 150s AD. In 161 AD, Marcus Aurelius was appointed consul for the year, a fitting appointment. Antoninus died early that year, probably on March 7th, 161 AD, aged 75, succeeded by Aurelius. According to the Historia Augusta, a few days before his death, Antoninus, at his Lorium estate, consumed a large quantity of cheese at dinner and became violently ill. The next day, he developed a fever. Realizing he was dying, he summoned Marcus Aurelius to his bedside and entrusted the state to him. It was late, and a guard approached the dying emperor for the night's password. Antoninus replied with equanimity, turned onto his side as if to sleep, and passed away. He had reigned for over 23 years, then the 2nd longest Roman emperor after Augustus. Antoninus had adopted his heir early in his reign, and Marcus Aurelius's succession was seamless. Antoninus's popularity among the Roman political elite ensured Marcus Aurelius easily persuaded the Senate to deify his predecessor and hold funerary games in his memory. The late emperor's remains were interred at Hadrian's mausoleum, and the Temple of Faustina was rededicated to Antoninus and Faustina. In a break from tradition, Marcus Aurelius petitioned the Senate to confer the Tribunicia Potestas and Proconsulare Imperium, along with the title of Augustus, upon his adoptive brother Lucius Commodus, making him co-emperor as Lucius Verus. This was the first instance in Roman imperial history of two men jointly holding the Augustus title, and they ruled as co-emperors until Lucius Verus's death in 169 AD, possibly from the plague sweeping the empire. Despite this shared imperial honor, Marcus's position as senior emperor remained unquestioned. Although Marcus Aurelius had hoped to emulate his adoptive father in presiding over an era of peace and stability, his reign would be dominated by the Marcomannic Wars, a series of conflicts fought around the Carpathian Basin and north into southern Germania, as Germanic and Asiatic tribes like the Marcomanni, Quadi, and Sarmatians sought to invade the Roman Empire. These foreshadowed the invasions that would destroy the empire between the 3rd and 5th centuries AD. Antoninus Pius was the fourth of the 5 good emperors who ruled Rome from Nerva's accession in 96 AD to Marcus Aurelius's death in 181 AD. Despite being the longest reigning of these 5, our knowledge of his reign is frustratingly limited by source scarcity, though archaeological evidence partially compensates. Nevertheless, he was undoubtedly a relatively successful ruler who prioritized effective administration and peace. Beyond a brief northward expansion effort in Britain, he maintained the realm's existing borders, focusing on infrastructure development and sound governance. Criticism might be leveled that he was singularly unambitious, neither conquering new lands nor building a grand forum in Rome, nor attempting novel provincial administrative projects. Even the Antonine Wall, built in Scotland, was quickly abandoned after Brigantes and Caledonians resisted it. But perhaps this was best. A Roman living through the civil wars of Julius Caesar and Caesar Augustus's age, or the chaos to come between the 3rd and 5th centuries AD, would undoubtedly have traded the war and instability of their time for the rather uneventful peace and tranquility of Antoninus Pius's reign. What are your thoughts on Emperor Antoninus Pius? Does he deserve his ancient reputation as a wise ruler, supported by both elites and commoners? Or was he an uninspired bureaucrat who achieved little ambitious during his long reign? Please share your thoughts in the comments section, and in the meantime, thank you for watching.